Zach Woods, what experiences from your own life have the writers taken to use for your character Jared on Silicon Valley?
Well, I think they take my sort of general beta maleness probably. Like, I am sort of at heart like an old lady, and so I think they've noticed that. And when I improvise as the character, a lot of times I emphasize that kind of thing. And so I think they've rightly identified me as like someone who loves like scented candles and quiet cups of tea, and have sort of steeped Jared in that ethos. Is that the right word? Also, the yelling in German in the sleep thing came from me. I don't yell in German in my sleep, but when I was in freshman, this is the weirdest way to start an interview, but I might have talked about this in another one of these actually, but when I was a freshman in college, I said, I went to sleep one night, and then when I woke up the next morning, my roommate was like, are you okay? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And I should preface this by saying I'm Jewish. My whole family's Jewish. My sister's going to be a rabbi. So bear that in mind. But he said, last night I was writing a paper and you were asleep, and then you shot up in the middle of the night and went, I hate the Jews, and then went back to sleep. And I told one of the writers this, and so I think that may have been some of the inspiration for that yelling in German, that inexplicable nocturnal anti-Semitism that I had that one time in college.
Now, people joke that actors on medical shows, like maybe if push came to shove, could perform a surgery. So I want to ask, are you really tech savvy now?
It took me like 25 minutes to figure out how to log into this. I think into this Google Hangout. I think I logged into your email or somebody else's email by accident. I had to change web browsers like 3 times. Then I had to like Windex my computer because I use it so infrequent. I use the webcam so infrequently that it was like so dirty it looked like you were looking at me through like a fogged like porthole mirror or window. So that's a long answer, but no, I'm horrible. I'm horrible at simple machines. I assembled a vacuum cleaner this morning and felt incredibly smug afterwards because for me, that is a crowning achievement of technical know-how.
Now, I understand that you auditioned for Ehrlich and Jared and Richard. So you're on this show, who would it be?
Say it again.
If you could play another character on Silicon Valley, who would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a funny question. If I could play another character, that's really interesting. I mean, it would be a real stretch, but I love Russ Hanneman. I think to play one of those like just total alpha male like shitheads would be really fun. I mean, Lori, but if I was a woman, I'd like to play Lori. I think that's a really funny character. I don't know. I love all the characters. But it is so crazy to me to think about like auditioning for Ehrlich. Like it's such a bizarre idea, the idea of me playing Ehrlich now. But at the time it seemed like, oh, maybe this will happen.
And what about who would you want to see play Jared out of the rest of the cast?
Oh, these are interesting questions. I feel like I'm at a sleepover or something. Okay, let me think. I mean, I think Thomas, just because like Thomas would play Jared so interesting. I think everyone would, but there's something about Thomas, like Thomas in real life, Thomas Middleditch, who plays Richard, is a very outgoing, kind of demonstrative, charismatic guy, but he's able to dial that down so much to play Richard and play this sort of like writhingly uncomfortable, sort of introvert of a man. So I'd be curious just to see how he could tailor make his own personality into a character like Jared. Like, I'd be so curious. I'd be curious to see that transformation.
Now, you talked in a previous about the differences between like filming like single camera sitcom versus in front of a live studio audience. I wanted to ask about what's the biggest difference between making Silicon Valley versus The Office?
I think for me, the main difference is just the experience is very, very different for me because The Office was the first television show I'd ever had, ever been on rather. And it was, I believe it was the 6th season when I joined. It was already like a huge international hit. So I felt like I was parachuting into this like very, very established, successful operation. And my sort of main experience of that was just like, oh, I hope I don't screw this up. I love this show so much. I don't want to undermine what they're already doing so well. So I was a little, and because I never really worked in television before. So for me, that felt more like just sort of trying to learn the ropes and not get in the way of something that was working and hopefully contribute something new. Whereas with Hooli-Con, I feel more ownership over it because I was there from the beginning and I was more experienced when I started, and I feel less trepidatious on Silicon Valley. So that's less of a technical answer about the ways the particular shows are made and more just about the interior experience of making both the shows. But for me, I feel more at home and comfortable in my skin on Hooli-Con just because I'm more experienced and I feel like greater ownership over it.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, The Office had more deleted scenes than any show like ever.
Yeah.
Is it the same with Silicon Valley, where you're shooting way more than you need to?
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. I mean, we improvise a ton, and most of it doesn't make it in. Most of the show is written because the scripts are phenomenal, but they're very indulgent about letting us screw around a lot and try things and experiment. And sometimes that stuff does make it in, so that's why they do it. But there are vast reservoirs of unused footage. And I do think it's kind of cool, like I think Mike Judge isn't a big fan of bloopers, maybe. Like he only wants I don't want to speak for him, but my guess is he probably wants the show to be the show and not to share all the shoe leather that got discarded on the cobbler's floor. And I actually think that's kind of cool. Like I like not being able to look back in the kitchen. Like you just have to have the meal that they serve. I think that's kind of cool in a weird way.
So what's been the hardest thing to shoot on the show?
The hardest thing to shoot? Some of the, like in the first season, I get locked in a car that gets sent to a shipping container and then sent to an island. And just for purely claustrophobia related reasons, that was kind of hard to shoot because they set up the shipping container and then I was in this dark car in the shipping container for a long time. So the experience of the actor and the experience of the character were not as far apart as you might imagine. But that was really fun. I love that storyline, but that was maybe the hardest thing to shoot.
I found that storyline like really hard to watch. I thought it kind of went too far in torturing Jared.
Because you started feeling empathy for the plight of Jared.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So readers want to know, are you ever going back to Veep?
My guess is no, because I think it'd be a little weird since we're programmed back to back. Like if you watched Veep and I was in Veep and then the next, or I guess it's the other way around. So if you watch Hooli-Con and then watch Veep and then I'm in Veep too, I think it would be disorienting. It'd be like, what's Jared doing in DC? But I mean, I would love to. I think that show is obviously top of the line. And I love those people, so I would welcome the chance. But my guess is they probably won't want to do that for understandable reasons.
Now, what about, do you ever get mistaken for another actor just on the street? Somebody's like, oh, hey, you're somebody famous. Are you?
Well, what happens a lot is people will be like, I know you. And I'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm an actor. And they'll be like, no, we went to high school together. And I'll be like, oh, really? And they'll be like, yeah. They'll be like, you're from like, you're from Dayton, right? I'll be like, oh no, I grew up in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I'll be like, no, Dayton. Like they'll insist often, like after I told them that we didn't go to high school together and that maybe they just have like seen something I'm in. They'll be like, no, we went to high school together. It's interesting. That interaction has happened to me a number of times. I always kind of get a kick out of it.
Now, I understand that you don't really watch Silicon Valley or stuff that you're in as much because it kind of colors your perception of how you play Jared. But do you have a favorite episode of the show that you know of?
I always love the finales, and I love the the jerk off joke finale. I love the season 2 finale, the season 3 finale, and this season I'm really like. There's a lot of really fun Jared Richards storyline in episodes 9 and 10, and I loved shooting it. It's like, without giving out way too much, Richard sort of faces a moral crisis a little bit, and in the process of facing that moral crisis, some tension actually emerges between Richard and Jared for the first time. And that was so fun and sad too to play with. So I think maybe the last 2 episodes of this season are my favorite that we've shot so far.
Yeah, our readers, they really liked For Jared, the episode that aired last week, the patent troll, where Jared has, his MD and he's talking to himself as Ed Chambers. Do you think that if you're nominated for an Emmy, you'll be submitting that one or another one, or maybe one of these ones that we haven't seen that you're talking about?
I think if I was nominated for an Emmy, I would probably submit the last either 9 or 10. I think, because those are the ones where, I don't know, I just feel like it's really new territory for Jared and exciting territory. So I'd probably do 9 is my guess.
Okay. Now I'd say it's unusual that Silicon Valley had one of you supporting actors a nomination, because you have such a strong ensemble.
Yeah.
The part of the problem is that there's just kind of so many of them, or so many of you guys, that unless you're like voting all of you guys, maybe one person chooses TJ Miller, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now your writers, you have however many of them, and what they always do is they just submit 2 of them each year. It's always like Alec Berg, and it kind of rotates who the other writer that they submit is. Would you guys ever be? Yeah. Would you know
that? They only submit 2 writers?
Exactly. Yeah. It strictly works. Like, is that something that you as actors would ever entertain?
Yeah, I'd never thought of that before. I didn't know that that was a strategy on the writing side. I mean, it is complicated with like ensemble shows, because the truth is, like, it's so collaborative. Like, you were asking about footage that doesn't make it into the show. Like, one thing that happens a lot of times is we'll ask each other for feedback, or we'll be like, oh, I want to try a joke here, but I can't think of something. Can you pitch a joke? And so, Martin will pitch Kumail a joke, or Kumail will pitch me a joke, or whatever, and we'll try it. And once in a while, those things work. And we're always trying to set each other up, and we're always trying to make each other look good, because we really love each other. And I think it's sort of a mutual admiration society all around. So on an ensemble show, that's where like awards get tricky, because really, like, if any one of us was ever nominated for an award, it really would be a collective, I think a collective honor. Like, if Martin gets nominated, that's because Kumail made him look good. And if I got nominated, it would be because, someone liked that joke that Kumail pitched me, or that Thomas pitched me. It's just that this is a long answer, but basically, like, in terms of like parsing out credit or whatever, it's kind of impossible. So I think that strategy that the writers have is interesting, and would possibly be like a really good idea.
Yeah. How do you feel about how I want to say it goes in circles? Like, it seems like you guys are a little bit further, and then something knocks you back down. Like, is that comforting as an actor, or something else is going to happen at the end of the season that I can't speak to? But
well, I think it resonates with my actual experience of life, which is that it's usually like something good happens, something not so good happens, something good happens, and it's sort of an alternation between triumph and rebuff all the time. In their case, the rebuffs seem to be a little bit more severe than the triumphs seem to be a little bit more mild. But I think that's good. I think I like that they're underdogs. And I do think in this season, they certainly face a substantial amount of adversity, but I think they also make headway in surprising ways. And I don't know, I never mind them getting set back, because it feels true to life to me. And I also feel like on the whole, they are at a somewhat glacial speed, but they are moving forward as a company.
Yeah, so one big change that we haven't seen so far, but we've obviously read about, is that you're from the cast. So when did you find out about that?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second. Say that again?
Oh, I was just saying that there is a big change coming up in the show that we haven't seen, but we've read about, in that you're losing T.J. Miller.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm wondering, when did you find out about that?
Well, we had a sense that that was going to happen, but it was around. I guess it was sometime after we wrapped that we found out officially, and it's really sad because TJ is a lovely human being and he's an amazing talent, obviously. So I'll miss her. Like, I think that character is a great part of the show.
All right, and what's your role on the papers?
Oh, that's interesting. They had me sign these like terrifying confidentiality agreements. It was like very draconian. Like I had to like write my name in blood on a scroll by candlelight. So I don't think I can talk about it because I'm scared I'll get dragged to court. I'll be thrown in jail.
Okay. Well, my apologies. That was not my intention.
No, it's okay. It's impressively researched. Yeah. And maybe it's okay to talk about. I don't know, but I was so scared by the NDAs.
What about with papers? Do you find that you're normally auditioning for roles, or people like offering you parts that are kind of more written toward you?
More what?
Or like, do you find that you're auditioning a lot, or you're getting a lot of calls for parts that people?
It's a mix. It's a mix. Like sometimes you'll get offers from people who know you, and sometimes there'll be something that's sort of outside of your established range, and then you'll audition for it. So I certainly get some offers, and then I get lots of auditions too. Yeah, it's a mix.
All right, and finally, is there anything that you're hoping for Jared season? I guess it's a little tricky because we haven't seen the last of this season, but what would you like to be playing?
In next season, is that what you said? I think I would love to see a little bit more of his extracurricular life. In this season, in the first episode, there's kind of a throwaway joke where the child locks rather are on in my car, and I say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was babysitting for my friend Gloria's great-granddaughter." And so, like from that, you know that he's friends with a woman named Gloria who has a great-granddaughter. So like Jared's friends with at least one very old woman. And I would just love to see more of that. Like, what are his friendships like outside of Pied Piper? I love the this guy fucks stuff, that Jared is sexually prolific and successful. Partly because I think like in shows, a lot of times the guys who are romantically successful are kind of jerks. So I actually like it that like in real life, I feel like someone who's empathetic and a good listener and interested and affectionate towards women would probably do well romantically. So I like that part of his character. So anytime they visit that storyline, I'm always pleased. But the true answer is that inevitably the stuff that they come up with in the scripts far surpasses anything that I could daydream about. Like I'm always more excited by the actuality of what they write than the sort of fantasy I have in anticipation of the coming season. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's true though. Like we don't actually see a ton outside the incubator. I feel like for kind of the core group. Like every so often we hear that somebody has a girlfriend, but then
right.
It's just.
Well, probably like 90% of the time on the show when someone says they have a girlfriend, it's a hallucinatory episode. And that's why you don't see them, is because they don't exist. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like, look, you don't want to like go on some like long digression into the character's personal life. But I do think if there's some way to integrate that into the world of the show, I'd be interested to see just how Jared's social circle stacks up.
All right. Thanks very much, Zach. We'll probably check in with you again.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for having me.
Okay.